Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 779B, and today's date is September 30th, 2015, and the title of this episode is U.S. Continues with Assad Propaganda as Russia Bombs the U.S. Proxy Army. Now, before I get started, I just want to make an announcement. The interview with Carl Denninger has been uploaded to the X22 Report Spotlight channel. If you are going to YouTube, just type in X22 Report Spotlight. I'll bring you right to that video. Or you can come over to the x22report.com site, scroll down a little bit, look over to your right, you will see the video right there. Let's get right into the economic collapse geopolitical news. Now, yesterday we talked about Minority Report and how fiction is starting to look like reality at this time. And Hitachi has come out with a new device, the Visualization Predictive Crime Analytics, PCA. And what does this system do? Well, the system is able to process a huge amount of data from many different sources, and then it processes it using machine learning to establish patterns of potential violent behavior that humans might simply overlook. PCA uses real-time social media, internet data feeds, to make calculations and pinpoint potential crime scenes down to a 200 square meter spot. The system also allocates relative threat levels to every situation. So what does it do? It blends real-time event data captured from public safety systems and sensors with historical and contextual crime data from record management systems, from social media and other sources, and it uses temporal prediction algorithms, which helps law enforcement and first responder teams to assign threat levels for every city block. So they're trying to predict from all the people that are walking around and everything who is a threat. Now, if we take this one step further, what are they trying to do with this? Because, okay, you get a threat level. And you say, okay, in this city block, something might occur. Are they going to start arresting people before they actually do something? Or they're just going to be ready for it on all these different blocks of the city? So I'm not very clear on exactly what they're trying to do, but if I look into the future here, it looks like they're going to start arresting people before they actually do something. And this is what it's starting to look like. Now, the FBI came out with their report, and the 2013 report, and there's a 2014 report, is showing that crime and murders, robberies and murders, have decreased when it was a banner year for gun sales. There was a record 21 million background checks for gun purchases completed. And when all those guns were in circulation, the FBI reports that murders and robberies decreased. That's very interesting. So, on November 10th, the FBI released a report showing violent crimes in 2013 decreased by 4.4% when compared to 2012 figures. And that estimated the number of property crimes decreased by 4.1%. And the slide is continuing in 2014. It's showing that as gun sales are going up, crime and murders, I should say robberies and murders, it's going down. So, when the government is out there continually telling you that guns are bad, we have evidence that no, it's actually stopping murders and stopping crimes or limiting them. Now, of course, when we look at all this, we know the reason why they want to remove weapons from the people. It has nothing to do with crime. It has nothing to do with murder. It has nothing to do with self-defense. It has to do with taking away the weapons from the people so they have full control of the people. Think about it. What do they need to control the people? Well, they need control of the creation of money, which they have. They need control of propaganda and news, Well, they thought they had that until the internet. Now they're trying to take over the internet, and they're trying to have the UN do this, where people have to get licenses, and we know the FCC is going to control the internet, and we're going to see them soon come out with additional laws, because they know the internet is the Wild West, and they need to tame it and control it. Will they be able to do it? Most likely not, but we'll have to watch and see. And once they have the news and the creation of money, what else is standing in their way? That would be a weapon. Because a population of 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 million people with a weapon in their hand, they cannot be controlled. Because you have to remember, the government is only a small body. And if all these people decide to rise up and say enough is enough, and they have a weapon in hand, they will not be able to stop them. And they realize this. They understand it. And this is why they've been trying so hard for so long to remove the weapons from the people. The founding fathers knew this. They knew eventually the government would lose, they would be out of control. And they would want to control everything. And the people would no longer matter. Because they've seen this before. They fought for it. So they understood it. And they knew it wasn't going to last for a long time. Thomas Jefferson said, I'd be surprised if it lasted 100 years. Well, here we are 200 plus years. But we've moved out of a democracy. We moved out of a free people. We've moved into a fascist country. A lot of people don't see this. So they have been trying, and I say they, the U.S. government central bankers, for a very long time to remove the weapons from the people. Because if you have a weapon, you cannot be controlled. And they know this, and this is why they're pushing so hard to control you. Now, out in Spain, we understand this Sunday, they had elections, and we see right now that Catalonia wants their independence. They want to break away from Spain. And we see Spain right now is going to indict the regional government in Catalonia for unconstitutionally calling a referendum on independence from Spain last year. This comes just 2 days after the party and other secessionist forces won a regional election. They don't want this to happen, so they're doing whatever they possibly can to stop it. And we can see if this doesn't work, they will ramp it up to try to stop it. They'll rig everything. And if that doesn't work, you will see boots on the ground to stop it. I mean, we already had the vans that drove in and took out the gold from the banks in Catalonia. Because they weren't sure how this was going to unfold. They wanted to hold their own physical gold and get it out of that area. And they will do whatever they have to do to stop this. We see out in Afghanistan, we've been talking about how the troops are not coming home. Actually, troops will be ramped up in Afghanistan. And the U.S. military right now is favoring keeping troops in Afghanistan way past 2016. And we knew this was going to happen. The U.S. forces are already joining in with the Afghanistan forces and fighting the Taliban. We're back in this war once again. Actually, we'd never left. That whole thing was a ruse because when President Karzai was in power, he wouldn't sign the bilateral security agreement. And if that's not signed, the troops would be held liable in Afghanistan. So the only thing they were able to do is start removing the troops from Afghanistan. And then Karzai, his term ended. John Kerry went into Afghanistan, helped out with the elections, got the man they wanted, and within weeks, the bilateral security agreement was signed. And guess what? The troops are back in. That's the reason why the troops left Iraq. It wasn't because they were calling them home, because the president at that time in Iraq, and Biden went over there many times trying to get them to sign it. They wouldn't sign the agreement. And that's why the troops left. Obama didn't pull them out and say, oh, the war's over. Had nothing to do with it whatsoever. Now, we understand that Russia has set up an intel sharing program with Iran, Iraq, Syria. And they've asked the U.S. to join. And the U.S. does not want to join. They haven't so far. Actually, they're going to limit the intel they're giving Iraq because they're nervous on what they're going to do with it. Are they going to show it to Russia? Well, we know for a fact that the U.S. is not bombing the Islamic State. The U.S. is bombing the infrastructure of Syria, clearing the way for the Islamic State, which is the proxy army for the United States government. Now, the Russian Federation Council, they gave their consent to President Putin for the use of Russian armed forces outside the territory of Russian Federation, and that means they can go into Syria specifically. According to the official, Russia will use only aviation in Syria. At this point, there are going to be no boots on the ground. Yes, there's going to be advisors. They've been there. Remember, Syria and Russia cooperate economically, militarily, and Assad and Russia and Putin, they're allies. They're working together here. Now, right now, what they're saying is the operation of the Russian Air Force in Syria will have a specific time frame. They're not going to spell out how long they're going to be there, but it's not going to be indefinite. So to me, it sounds like they have the intel. They know where the Islamic State is. They know where they have to bomb. And for them, they're saying this is not going to take that long. Remember, the Islamic State, they don't have, ground-to-air defenses at this point. They're not going to be able to hit the Russian jets. Now, can the U.S. go ahead and feed them intel to move out of certain areas? Absolutely. Will they be able to do this? Who knows, because they don't know where Russia is, what mission they're flying, and where they're going, and at what time. Because Russia has not shared this information. Putin is out there, and he's saying Russia will deliver preemptive strikes against terrorists. And he's specifically saying the Islamic State, even though they have nothing to do with Islam. Well, Putin already told us that the Islamic State is a bunch of paid mercenaries. The Free Syrian Army is a bunch of paid mercenaries. But we already knew this. He's just coming out and telling the world at this point that yes, these are paid mercenaries. Yes, it's not really Islam that's driving this force. Most of these people are not a religion of Islam. They're not even Syrian. They're paid mercenaries, and if someone pays them more money, they'll switch sides. Not a big deal. So let's look at the time frame of what has happened here. So it all started out where Russia set up coordination between Iraq, Iran, and Syria. They coordinated the positions of where the Islamic State is, and they did this like a day before. Russia went ahead and they informed the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad about how they're going to use the Russian Air Force in Syria. So they weren't hiding anything. Then the U.S. propaganda started. As Russia, pushed ahead with airstrikes, they were saying, we're not sure if Russia's actually hitting the Islamic State. We don't know who they're hitting. It could be the Free Syrian Army. Oh, you mean like the United States was doing? They were hitting not the Islamic State, but the Syrian army and their infrastructure and civilians. Putin is out there saying that no, we are going to hit the Islamic State. Now, if they hit the Free Syrian Army, is that really a big deal at this point? Because they are aligned with Assad, they support Assad, and this opposition group, the Free Syrian Army, they're not even Syrian. He knows they're paid mercenaries. And the U.S. is out there saying, this is absolutely ridiculous. Oh my God. See, he's a tyrant. isn't this what the U.S. does in each one of these countries? They put a puppet government in, and any person that opposes the new puppet government, they fire upon and try to get rid of them? Look at Yemen. The people took back their country. What is the U.S. doing at this point? Killing 2,300 civilians, fighting the people so they can bring in their puppet government. Here, in Syria, we have the elected government. And these aren't the people of the country that are fighting to get Assad out. They're paid by the U.S. They're paid mercenaries. There's not even a terrorist group there. Well, right now, Russia said that the U.S. should stop flying in the country. Now, the U.S. doesn't have permission to fly in the country. Russia does. The U.S. doesn't. Assad asked Russia to come in and fly in the country. He didn't ask the U.S. The U.S. was not invited. But Kerry is out there saying that U.S. planes will continue to fly in Syria despite the warning from Russia. Well, there could be some type of accident. There could be an incident if they're not coordinating their efforts. And of course, their efforts are completely different. Now, Moscow believes it's necessary to include the Islamic State and those who support them in the UN Security Council anti-terrorism sanction list. And the U.S. doesn't want this, and they're pushing back on it. Well, we know why they're pushing back on it, because it's their proxy army. Russia officially informed NATO leadership about the beginning of the airstrikes against the Islamic State and let them know. NATO press service confirmed that, yes, Moscow did notify them. The U.S. right now is regarding the actions of Russia aviation in Syria as dangerous since they're not talking to each other. Well, Russia came out many, many times and said, listen, let's coordinate. Let's join forces. Let's do this together. And the U.S. said, no, we reject that plan. Why would they reject it? It makes no sense. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Washington has grave concerns if Russian airstrikes hit Syrian targets where the Islamic State fighters were not present. Mean like the United States has been doing. Remember, it's always the opposite of what they're saying. So the opposite is now what the U.S. was doing, and still at this point. Kerry once again stated that the Islamic State cannot be defeated as long as Assad's in power. Well, we'll see about that, because Russia's planning to wipe them out. If the Islamic State is wiped out, there's no reason for the coalition forces. There's no reason for them to be in Syria. And this is going to pose a huge problem. France right now is welcoming everyone willing to collaborate with the anti-terrorist coalition in Syria, but on certain conditions. And they want to make sure that Russia is actually hitting the Islamic State. It's funny how they keep saying this. Pentagon Chief Ashton Carter said that the U.S. believes it is impossible to both fight the Islamic State in Syria and support Assad at the same time, because it only risks escalating the civil war in Syria. Well, no, if you get rid of the Islamic State, you have left is the Free Syrian Army. And then you have the Assad army and the Free Syrian Army, which is very weak at this point because most of them defected to the Islamic State, which is the proxy army. And what they're saying is, if this occurs and they wipe out the Islamic State, guess what? The Syrian army is going to run right over the Free Syrian Army and take back the country. This is what they're worried about. Right now, you hear all over the corporate media that Russia is hitting civilians. Right now, the Pentagon really came out and said there's no confirmations that any civilians died from Russian bombing. The U.S. says they're going to continue with their airstrikes. At the same time, Russia is hitting the Islamic State. So the U.S. is going to be hitting the infrastructure, and Russia is going to actually be hitting the Islamic State. And NATO right now is voicing their concerns over the possibility that Russia's airstrikes in Syria do not target the Islamic State. Now, they keep bringing up this propaganda because they want to make it look like Putin is going after the Free Syrian Army. I don't think he has to at this point. I think all he needs to do is basically decimate the army of the Islamic State, and the Free Syrian Army is so weak they won't be able to hold out for much longer, and they will be completely gone. So we can see at this point in time, the next move is the United States move, and we're going to have to see what occurs at this time. Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, they have intel that the Islamic State, the proxy army for the United States government, central bankers, they are in possession of components for weapons of mass destruction. Very interesting. Urging that the Islamic State be included on an anti-terror sanction list as a separate subject. So they're starting to realize they do have these weapons of mass destruction. Chemical weapons, they might have mini nukes. Who knows what they have at this point? And where did they get them? We know where. The United States, the coalition forces. And they're starting to find out all this information, and this is what the U.S. is very nervous about. Now, as we know, NORAD is going to be moving into Cheyenne Mountain. They're moving communication gear into the underground bunkers, and they're doing this right now. And we could see at this point they are doing this because they're worried about a nuclear war or an EMP strike. So they reopened Cheyenne Mountain. They're bringing everything in there. And they're saying that this was built back in the 60s to protect the command center from nuclear blasts. And now they're also saying that it will protect them from an EMP pulse, either from the sun or from a nuclear weapon that is exploded over the Earth. So the question is, why are they doing this at this point? I mean, are they doing it because they think an EMP pulse is going to occur from the sun? Are they doing it because they believe a nuclear weapon is going to be exploded over the country? Or do they believe there's going to be a nuclear war? Well, we know if you explode a nuclear weapon over the country, it will send down an EMP pulse. And we know once this war gets started, the war could go nuclear. And they're already protecting themselves. They're making preparations because they understand. They've been informed that this is the direction that we're headed. And if they're getting prepared in some way, somehow, I mean, right now it's very hard to, build a bunker for a nuclear war. But there's other ways to be prepared because we don't know if we are in a nuclear war. I mean, God forbid that this actually does happen. But the evidence is showing that we are headed down this path. And if things really go south for the U.S. government central bankers, they will resort to nuclear weapons. And, I mean, will this destroy everyone? No, there'll be survivors. And we can see at this point that you need to be prepared for an economic collapse. You need to be prepared for war, because we know this war is not going to happen just out in Europe. We know war will happen here in the United States, something we haven't seen since the Revolutionary War, because at this point in time, they do have the ability to fire missiles that can reach the United States. They don't have to be nuclear weapons. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And we know there's going to be war. We know there's going to be an economic collapse. And we need to be prepared for all different scenarios. This is why I say stock up on food, water supplies, medical supplies, toiletries, cash, gold, silver, weapons to protect your family, bug out bags so you can ready to move at a moment's notice. And if you're continually stocking, don't stop. If you haven't started, you can go to lifereliance.com. They have bug out bags, they have seeds, they have water filtration systems. You can customize your order and get it delivered right to your house or apartment or wherever you live. And at this point in time, we all need to be prepared, just like the government is being prepared. And we see which way the government is moving. They're heading down a path, and they're not going to turn back. They're going to keep pushing and pushing until the very end. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.